Peter, let me throw this at you really quick, and I'll let you finish your point. As someone that lived near a reservation, I mean, I was like 10 miles from the Flathead Indian. I mean, it was, and I covered high schools in Montana. I would rarely see a game where I didn't go to where I wouldn't see some kids wearing Chief Wahoo. So can you understand why someone might be confused if you walk onto a reservation where they have 100% right to say I'm offended or not offended, and then to walk into that situation and say it's almost confusion. It's confusion.
Yeah, not only are they not protesting, they're actually supporting the logo.
Yeah. I don't think this is an easy issue, especially because I believe any Clevelander who didn't grow up schooled in the issue would necessarily be confused.
Yeah, and Peter, I can tell you, and I openly and honestly admit it, I grew up in one of the greatest suburbs of all time when it comes to racial diversity and ethnic diversity and, religious tolerance, Cleveland Heights. Growing up, I mean, we had everything growing up there in the 80s. And, to go there and then to not understand anything about Native Americans and Native American culture other than something that maybe I had read in a book or seen at the Natural History Museum here, it was an eye-opening experience to move out west and to be that close from a reservation and try to understand another culture that you just didn't know anything about. So that's just my point. Sure. Yeah. I think we need to be educated, and I think that education ends ignorance.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I would say that a lot of these people that you saw wearing the Wahoo hats aren't necessarily versed in what that sort of imagery, what this sort of Sambo imagery even is. That just like to us Clevelanders who grew up watching the magical Wahoo alien, I once referred to it as a slugging alien angel of joy, because it really marks those first trips to the ballpark, at least for those of us who went to the old stadium. And I could see how some folks don't see it as anything but that. But when you step back and look at its roots and what it really is, you can understand why those protesters are there every year. And again, it gets me back to the bottom line, which is it's something that has its roots in dehumanization. And if there's even one person who tells you that dehumanizes them, and you see that they have an argument for it, then why cling to it?
Hey, Peter, hang on the line. Chuck Booms who wants to jump back in on this conversation. You good with that?
Oh, boy, hang on.
All right, go ahead. Peter Pattakos is on the line. He's from ClevelandFrowns.com. He's got also writing for Cleveland Scene magazine. Chuck Booms, who was with us for a while. Chuck, I knew there was no way you could drive home without jumping back into this argument.
Well, Pete, you're lucky I have good insurance on my car because I almost went off the highway twice with this nonsense. I never in my life have heard such inflammatory, just really make-believe garbage in my entire life. And by the way, do some research, Pete, before you come on the radio. It clearly says in the Sports Illustrated article that they showed them mascots, including Chief Wahoo. So know what you're talking about before you come on with your liberal, nonsensical, even if one person is offended, what the hell kind of way is that to think when 83% of Indians on reservations said, leave it alone, and that beats you, Pete.
They're not talking about Chief Wahoo there. They're looking at...
You're not smarter than everybody.
Pete, I'll give you a chance.
You're not better than everybody, and your opinion is not warranted.
Chuck, you had your chance. Peter, go ahead.
Well, again, I would just say that Sports Illustrated survey talks about names in general. We don't know. I don't believe Chuck knows what logos were shown. If Wahoo was shown among a number of...
Hey, Chuck. Go ahead, Chuck, read. Read it, Chuck.
I'm going to read it right off the paper, and then, Pete, you're going to apologize to me and the listeners at 92.3 The Fan for coming on with no facts. None.
Okay, Chuck.
Don't drive and read.
Hang on,
Got
Peter.
it?
Chuck, just say your point, Chuck. Let's go back and forth. We're a kinder, gentler show than yours. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, well, here it is. It says that they showed them the names Redskins, Braves, Chiefs, Indians, and also clownish figures such as the Indian Chief Wahoo and the Redskins mascot. They went over all this. They showed it to all of them. Okay?
Right,
I'm looking at it.
Peter,
right, and again, what I'm going to say is...
Chuck, give Peter 2 seconds. Chuck, give Peter a chance to respond. Go ahead, Peter.
When you take Chief Wahoo in isolation, and you point out what it actually is, and you point out the historical era that it comes from, It's just wrong. It's a Sambo caricature made by the dominant culture to oppress a minority race. That's what it is. If you want to cling to it,
Chuck, just give Chuck, you can have all the airtime you want. Just let Peter respond. That's all.
Well, wait a minute, Andy. That's ridiculous. He's insulting American Indians right now by basically saying they're too stupid to look at Chief Wahoo on his own and go, I'm not bothered. How dare he come on the radio and call an entire race of people dumb because he thinks he's smart. He's an idiot.
I think this speaks for itself. I think that Chuck's argument speaks for itself here.
Right,
and I think,
you're
again,
a moron.
You've got. Okay. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks.
Chuck, hang on. Chuck, I'll give you.
Start leaving the rest of us alone.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think that the fact that you see these activists outside the stadium every year, it proves the point. And there are people to whom this is an extremely important issue. People of the culture that the Wahoo caricature characterizes, and I think it's those people that you have to listen to. Sports Illustrated does a survey and lumps in all of the Native American names and logos in one. That's just not an argument for Wahoo.
Pete, what nationality are you?
Chuck, why does it matter? I'm not going to get into it. I think it should be pretty obvious.
I'm German. What are you?
I'm half Greek, half Ukrainian.
Half Greek, half Ukrainian. Okay, so if I said to you, I see these Euro stands down in the flats and wherever I go to whatever, and you know what? I'm not into Greeks. I don't really like Greeks. They offend me. I don't like their food. They kill lambs and roast them and call it food. And I go through this ridiculous thing. You would start laughing. But you know what? According to your logic, if I'm one person that's offended by Greeks, they ought to shut the stand down because I'm allowed to have a legitimate point. It's wrong. It's wrong. Don't you get it?
If my people had this country to themselves for however many hundred years.
The Greeks were slaughtering people left and right.
Right, and Chuck, you don't see anything like Chief Wahoo about any other race. You don't see it.
There's nothing comparable, Chuck. I go by a Greek restaurant and
I think your example brings up a really good point.
It reminds me of what the Greeks did to other cultures, and I'm offended. How about that?
All right, boys, here's the story. Unfortunately, I could let this go on forever and let you guys go back and forth here, and I appreciate both of your point of views. Chuck, as you know, we have to pay some commercials here. We have to pay some bills here, so we got to do that.
You ought to charge him.
Chuck, thank you. We'll listen to you tomorrow morning. Peter, when is your story coming out in Scene Magazine?
Again, we hope it'll be out next week.
Let him plug his
shortly
story
after that. And I invite Chuck to, if he feels this strongly about this, he can come to my website. He can put his arguments in writing so that folks can see how weak they are. I'll just invite him. I'll publicly debate him at any point on this. So that's an open invitation.
Good, he can come on tomorrow.
Okay, why don't you guys...
Tomorrow morning.
All right, Chuck, you know how to get a hold of me, bud.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'll just dial 1-800-RACIST. That ought to get you.
Peter Pattakos, thank you. ClevelandFrowns.com. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Make sure you read him. He's got a story coming out in Scene Magazine. Chuck Booms, I'll listen to you every morning here on 92.3 The Fan. Thanks, Chuck.